It's showtime.
It's the pre-party with J. Cal.
We are professional wrestling.
I'm building an alliance.
You are tuned into
the absolute top of the mountain, the ultimate professional wrestling.
Alliance-wrestling.com.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is the pre-party, a presentation of Alliance-wrestling.com. Take two. What is up, everybody? This is the pre-party, a presentation of Alliance-wrestling.com, your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance and the United Wrestling Network. And I'm still trying to get all my stuff together, so if you excuse me for just a minute here while I pull this up and do this real quick. What is up, everyone? You guys came to talk some NWA, that is for sure, because I see you guys. You are already in. You're already in the chat. You are already in this thing. And why is my computer acting all crazy? Stop acting bonkers. Willie Bowen's in the house. Jimmy from the LB. Big Tex, Terry McDermott's in the house. Wrestling with MMA, he's here. DKM is here. Everybody, can you... I'm looking at your comments. Everyone's here. Okay, great. Then we can get to it, right? Let's get to it. So, first of all, I hope your week has been wonderful. I hope you've been having a good time. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're avoiding the COVID. And more so than that, I just hope you guys are having a good time. My name is J. Cal. Each and every week we bring to you this pre-party. Now, originally the pre-party was set to go right before NWA Power. We would do this to kind of hype you up for whatever the NWA was going to be putting on at 6:05 on YouTube, on their NWA channel. And I felt like we did a pretty good job of firing everyone up, talking about wrestling, talking about Southern NWA wrestling. And the drawback to that, though, is, well, since January, there hasn't been any new tapings of NWA Power. You're all aware of this. The NWA Shockwave, although it was shortly lived and did plug some of those holes, I mean, that was just a modified version of primetime live from the United Wrestling Network. And although it was cool for those of you who didn't pay for those to be able to see these really cool matches, it's unfortunate that the NWA still hasn't really done much in way of producing its own content. But, well, I mean, that's kind of how it goes, right? I almost spit out my drink because I read where Chris Drummond says, "We need a new owner of the NWA." Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us today. A new owner of the NWA. That's a tall order to fill, because last time I checked, William Patrick Corgan is still the owner, and William Patrick Corgan still has a lot of bread. So I don't think he's going to be keen on selling that anytime soon. But yeah. And Jimmy says the obligatory bank. No, this is done with intention, because besides, I think it's really cool that you could see through my can. Hopefully one day they reach out and want to sponsor this show. Our rates are very affordable. If any of you like to sponsor this show, slide into the DMs and we'll talk about it. I'm getting a phone call from Wisconsin as we speak, so I must have pissed somebody off. Well, today is Groundhog's Day. And it was reported earlier today that Nick Aldis actually stepped outside of the gym and did not see his own shadow, which means that spring will be back sooner than anticipated. And the cool thing about that is when spring returns, we're supposed to get NWA power back. So I really did think that the NWA, the talk of their return, last week we had a fun conversation about who we thought could make an impact immediately in the NWA. And news, I don't want to say it broke, but it kind of leaked out that a particular WWE employee, wow, I said WWF, I don't normally do that. I'm not catty like that. Current, and then we take a break, calm. I did it again. He's not a former WWF employee. There is a wrestler currently under WWE contract who is well known to be out of contract after WrestleMania weekend, and I don't know if it's entirely possible. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I for one would celebrate this like none other. And I'm talking about if the WWE fails to re-sign this guy, which wouldn't surprise me considering the fact they really haven't utilized his potential. They haven't utilized him to his fullest extent. And I'm talking about Cesaro. I mean, us who knew him beforehand always call him Claudio Castagnoli, very European. Claudio Castagnoli, outside of being a very dominant professional wrestler with the WWE, holding tag team titles and winning the Andre the Giant Battle Royal, is a very accomplished pro wrestler in and of itself, but used horribly in the WWE. Whether it be in a makeshift tag team with him and Jake Hager, or the tag team where he teamed up with oh gosh, what's his name, Sheamus. Never utilized to his fullest potential. And if we're all to believe what was posted, if his contract is set to expire, I mean, good Lord, could you imagine the magnitude that Cesaro could bring to the NWA? Now, hear me out, because yes, I know there will be a lot of suitors, right? Because of course, everyone expects former really good WWE talent to end up in AEW, but AEW at some point is going to reach a threshold where it can't sign any more contracts. And it's not like just because you go to AEW means they're going to utilize you correctly. I mean, look at Miro, right? Formerly Rusev, he's been pretty forgettable. Pac hasn't really been used like I'm sure he thought he would when he signed with AEW. And when you look at, there's other promotions also out there, Impact and Ring of Honor, and of course New Japan Pro Wrestling, and then the bevy of international wrestling promotions, All Japan, Pro Wrestling Noah, AAA in Mexico, CMLL, the ever-growing promotions in Europe. I mean, you can make a case for Cesaro Claudio Castagnoli really showing up in any of these places. But why the NWA might seem more appealing to him more so than some of these other promotions is simple. Flexibility. When guys get into wrestling, yes, they're here to make money. This is a for-profit deal. No one gets into wrestling hoping to lose money or scrape by. They all want to become superstars. Now, Claudio Castagnoli, Cesaro, whatever you want to call him, made his fortune already. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's more money to be made, right? But he's made a comfortable living while in the WWE. And he can continue to do that by just re-signing on the contract after WrestleMania. Or he could opt to go to a place where they will utilize him correctly. Again, that could be anywhere. But what the NWA has that's very attractive to anybody who's looking to extend their professional wrestling career is there's only 4 days a month that when the NWA is firing on all cylinders, you're even working. Now, let's take 2 steps backwards, too. I'm not advocating that any wrestler wants to be a part-timer, but with that kind of a schedule, it allows you to do more. And so if you're Claudio Castagnoli and want to work for All Japan Pro Wrestling or New Japan Pro Wrestling, or if you just want to keep your name out there in case a better deal comes around, the NWA would be ideal. Again, working 4 days a week. And what do we know about the NWA is that they're looking for some of the brightest stars out there. Now, Claudio Castagnoli is turning 41 this year. So he isn't a baby face. He's not a young kid. I'm sure he's looking to cement his legacy. And if that's not going to be with the WWE, perhaps it could be with the 10 pounds of gold. Because, let's be honest, who could challenge Nick Aldis more so than somebody like Claudio Castagnoli? Who's got more cachet when it comes to professional wrestling than Claudio Castagnoli? Now, maybe I'm a fanboy who's just hoping and wanting, but I remember when Claudio Castagnoli was working the Championship Wrestling from Hollywood inaugural television tapings in Santa Ana, California. And I remember that he had worked matches with Nick Madrid, that he was a part of a stable with Adam Pearce and Rocky Romero, and it was so short-lived because he got called to go work for the WWE. He got signed by NXT. And at the time, it was the King of Wrestling's. He and Chris Hero were supposed to take NXT by storm, and eventually they pared that down to just Cesaro. And Cesaro made his own way in the WWE. But I really think that he would be an amazing asset for the NWA. And I, for one, would never tell Billy Corgan how to spend his money. But I think that if you had somebody like Cesaro on your roster, I mean, he would draw what you're probably paying him. I've heard of some of the outlandish contracts that some of the NWA talent had, and who knows if those are true numbers or not. But I don't think that those numbers would be far off for a guy like Claudio Castagnoli. I think it would be beneficial for the NWA. I think it'd be a win-win situation. And I'm going to go to you guys and see what your comments are, because I see you guys have been talking this entire time. The comments are here on the side. If you want to join the conversation, all you have to do is just jump on the YouTube page, jump on Twitch, and start leaving comments. So I see that okay, DKM's going to give me a nickel. I'll take it. Chris Drummond says, AEW or Impact are going to offer the world to Claudio Castagnoli, and yeah, they should. They should. Let's be honest. There's not one talent underutilized more on this God's green earth than Claudio Castagnoli. He is a phenomenal wrestler. He should already have been a multi-time WWE World Champion. He should have defeated Brock Lesnar. He should be the one that won Royal Rumble, and obviously that's not what they're going for. You guys kind of agree with me. Jimmy from the LB says he's definitely underutilized. Cesaro to the NWA? Good joke. More like AEW New Japan, according to Lamb. And Lamb, I hear what you're saying, buddy. I do. But if I'm a wrestler and I look at the scale of things, now Moxley is different. Moxley is a former WWE World Champion, but for him to get an opportunity in the in AEW, I just keep going back to Rusev. I keep going back to Miro and looking at what they're doing with him. And if I am a potential WWE free agent, I don't want anything to do with that. I can't remember his name right now, and you guys will help me out here in a minute. He was the perfect 10 in WWE. I can't think of his name right now for the life of me. But he went there to have this feud with Cody Rhodes that basically never materialized. And I think he's even done with AEW at this point. So, I don't know. I see a lot of you guys are saying that maybe that wouldn't happen, but I disagree. Chris says Pac is in the world title hunt. I mean, but is he though? Is he really? Wrestling with MMA says, I would love to see Claudio and Hero tag team up again. Yeah, absolutely. Hero and Claudio, Crockett Cup 2021. Let's do it. Let somebody book it right now, right? The NWA would have to increase its money drastically. And look, let's be honest. Billy Corgan is not a money mark. He's not coming around to throw money around just for the sake of throwing money around. But if he wanted to, he could spend some money for Claudio Castagnoli. And especially if it's only a part-time basis, and knowing that he would be a free to work anywhere else after the NWA, I mean, he could still make a great living. But that's neither here nor there. DKM says, heard that on FTR already. Hell, they'd have a forgettable title run, and now they are ready for a push. I'm not sure what you mean, DK. Chris Drummond says, I believe with this Battle of the Belt storyline about to happen, I think they will thrive. The Battle of the Belts, Impact, New Japan, AEW. Yeah, I mean, like, look, we don't know. I don't want to hedge my bets on what AEW, Impact, and New Japan Pro Wrestling are going to do. Ultimately, at the end of the day, for all wrestling organizations, they have to focus on themselves. Ring of Honor is doing a great job of focusing on Ring of Honor. WWE is doing a great job of focusing on WWE. The promotions like AEW, who are able to utilize talent from Impact, tremendous. They're able to work with New Japan Pro Wrestling, phenomenal. But at the end of the day, you still have to focus on your product and what you're producing. And I wouldn't hedge my bets on what anyone else is doing. If I were Claudio Castagnoli and Cesaro, whatever you want to call him, I would focus on what is going to allow me to grow the most as a performer and make the most amount of money. And maybe the NWA isn't the answer. But of course, I would hope that someone from the NWA would see this, see Claudio as an opportunity. Because again, a match headlining Nick Aldis and Claudio Castagnoli is a draw. And I think putting him on your card, knowing what we know about him, knowing how underutilized he is, to me, this is a big draw. So I would go for it. Chris Drummond says he believes Austin Aries is the perfect choice for NWA champion. I mean, except for that he's difficult to work with, except for the fact that he's kind of on the smaller side. His promos are great, and he is a phenomenal worker, but it doesn't really fit the image of what Billy Corgan and Nick Aldis have said about the NWA in the past. DKM says all three already have other champions. FTR is on the outside. Okay. Anyone but DKM said anyone but Harry's. Fair enough. Lamb says Matt Cordova, Zack Ryder. That's not who I was talking about. The gentleman who I'm speaking of, I think his name is Sean Spires. At least that's what he was on the Indies before he went to the WWE. They used to call him the Perfect 10 in the WWE, and I apologize because I can't think of his name. DKM says, I believe with the Guerrillas of Destiny eventually debuts with AEW, they will face FTR. I mean, I wouldn't count on the Guerrillas working with AEW at all. I mean, if you listen to Tama Tonga talk about AEW and this this variation of the Bullet Club, they're very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not really big on it, and kind of look at Gallows and Anderson as sellouts. So I don't think that they would work together, but I could be confused. And yeah, you guys just got it. Wrestling with MMA, Sean Spears, Ty Dillinger. Thank you. I couldn't think of his name. Ty Dillinger went to AEW thinking he was going to be a star, and nothing could have been further from the truth. He barely got any TV time. His run there was mostly forgettable. And with good cause. I mean, you've got guys like Cody Rhodes and Chris Jericho and John Moxley and up and comers like MJF and it's very easily to get lost in the shuffle. And so for every success story, when you hear about like Cody doing what his thing and gaining this success, you look at guys like Miro, who's not being utilized. Jake Hager is basically a background performer. A lot of these guys aren't getting their just desserts. And if I signed with AEW and I was being utilized the way those gentlemen are being used, I'd be looking for an out too. Because again, you're trying to create yes, it's all about money. It's all about the dollars. Highest bidder's always going to win. I just saw it today. Somebody tweeted at Marie Canales and asked her if she's done with the WWE for good, and she goes, well, I like money. And I mean, and that's it exactly. Like, if someone's going to pay you, you're going to show up. But if you're also worried about your legacy, I mean, it's up to you to kind of craft that. And we know with WWE that you're really out of control when it comes to your own destiny. And with AEW, they haven't proven to me that they are 100% flawless at building up talent. So that's my feeling on that. DK says not everyone can be on top, and you're right, DK. They can't. Not everyone can be on top, but some guys aren't even being really utilized. Again, Miro was so over in the WWE. Rusev Day was such a big thing, and for the most part, it's sputtered. Like, he doesn't need to be in the world title picture. Lamb says David Marquez told that on the Pro and Bro podcast by Fred Rosser that the best of AEW, that they react instead of building up for the next 3 to 5 years. WWE, on the other hand, does that with NXT. Yeah, I mean, NXT is always supposed to have just been a place to create new stars under the WWE guidance. That whole process was supposed to eliminate them having a need for signing rival talent. They'll just make their own. And again, if you guys ever watch baseball, right, and really all professional sports, you sign guys when they're young and sculpt them into the model that you want. And if you do that just right, you have talent for years to come. And when that talent is there, then you can use them in the way that you want. Whereas, and it's always cheaper to do that because you lock them up under long-term contracts. Whereas if you have to go and sign some big names, like if you're going to try to go get Okada from New Japan Pro Wrestling, it's not going to be cheap. If he could be had, he's going to be expensive. So, anyways, Willie Bowen says he wished that Brian Cage and Watts would come to NWA United Wrestling Network. Well, I mean, Watts is still in the United Wrestling Network, right? So, I mean, you're good with that, right? I do expect Watts to be a part of the NWA when it returns. I have nothing that says that. So, one thing I wanted to address on this podcast, if you guys haven't already, you should check out, this is, what is it called? I'll look it up here. I want to make sure I get it right. You should look up the Discord for This Is Pro Wrestling. Because I really feel like if you're not, you're missing out. A lot of great conversation, and not just NWA, but really all pro wrestling. And I'm trying to pull it up here right now so I can give you the right name. So yeah, it is called This Is Pro Wrestling on Discord. I'll put a link here in the chat. I think I can do that. No, I can't. Okay, well, just remember that. This is Pro Wrestling. Now, This Is Pro Wrestling. That's Gary Horn. That's Dr. Rob Stinson. That's that hashtag NWA fam. I love those guys. That's also my boy, Hey, it's Will Daly. I love those guys. We're all kindred spirits. We all are like-minded. And you guys should check out their podcast, too. They think they go live on Thursdays and Sundays, I think. But this forum that they have on Discord, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of talk. And one conversation I saw was somebody was asking about Ray Gonzalez. Now, if you guys don't know who Ray Gonzalez is, that's fine. It's a footnote. It's historical. But Ray Gonzalez is a Puerto Rican professional wrestler. He's not just a slouch. He's a draw for Puerto Rican wrestling. He has held the WWC Universal Championship. Now that's Carlos Colon's wrestling promotion in Puerto Rico. Carlos Colon is the father of Carlitos, so you guys know him. He just made his return to Raw last night, and his return to the Royal Rumble the night before that. Anyways, so we talk about Puerto Rico. It's always been a hotbed for professional wrestling, thanks in part to Carlos Colon and everything that's happened with the World Wrestling Council, and that staple, that talent exchange over the years they've had with American, well, I mean, it's all American, but with stateside professional wrestling. And a lot of these talents would come and go. We talk about Dutch Mantel, Bruiser Brody. A lot of guys would go back and forth to Puerto Rico. It was a big thing then. It still happens now. I mean, that's where Biss kind of got his start. Anyways, back in 2005, Jeff Jarrett, the NWA World Champion by way of TNA Wrestling, went down to Puerto Rico. Now, they were setting up a working relationship in Puerto Rico. They were going to do talent exchanges. Essentially, they were giving the boys in Impact another place to work other than, the studios in Orlando, Florida. And this was going to be a really big deal for both parties. And to kick this off, they had a title match between Ray Gonzalez and Jeff Jarrett. But people think that because Jarrett lost the match, that Gonzalez became world champion. And I'm here to tell you that that is false. And anyone who's perpetuating that is muddying up the waters. Because, again, in a sport that does have... it's kayfabe. The results are predetermined. We all know that. We have to suspend belief to understand that wrestling is wrestling. We enjoy it. But at the end of the day, the results are predetermined. In 2005, when Jeff Jarrett goes to Puerto Rico to wrestle in IWA Puerto Rico against Ray Gonzalez, he loses the match because the NWA referee, is injured, and a Puerto Rican referee from the IWA counts the count. But the title is stripped of Ray Gonzalez in the same show because, again, it wasn't an NWA official, and the NWA doesn't acknowledge it. Now, IWA Puerto Rico ran with it because, of course, this pops the crowd. It gets people talking about it. But this was ignored by Impact. This was ignored by the NWA. And this was just something that happened to pop a crowd. The NWA, Impact TNA Wrestling would have their talents down there again. Abyss would be down there. Jeff Jarrett would wrestle down there. Conan, I think it was Hot Stuff Hernandez, I think, was down there. So they did these talent exchange, but again, the title wasn't ever intended to change hands. It was never put on Ray Gonzalez in an official manner. The board of directors never voted on that. The board of directors never acknowledged it. If someone in that chat, the Discord forum last night, pointed out to me where several years later, Bruce Tharp recognized it as a title change, but even that was a little bit sketchy. I think someone just snuck it in under the radar, and nobody was really paying attention because he never actually won the title. And I think it's really, really dangerous to try to rewrite history, to try to make something that really didn't happen. Ray Gonzalez never won the title, and anyone who's pushing that narrative, again, it's just muddying up the waters. The NWA on their website never even acknowledged the controversy. Now, back then, I keep wanting to say AEW, TNA Wrestling was working hand in hand with the National Wrestling Alliance. Back then, each one of those title changes was supposed to be approved by the NWA. And in 2005, they were still early into that relationship. But the relationship lasted a total of 5 years. So we're like in year 3 of this relationship. And there were usually a member of the board of directors on hand. Dave Marquez even said as much when he was on the podcast where he talked about being there when Christian Cage won the title and was shocked, surprised that he won the title because it wasn't something that hadn't been discussed, hadn't been talked about. So I guess what I'm saying is I hate that narrative. I hate the fact that people think that this guy actually won the title. Gary Horn, I don't know if he's legitimate or just pushes my buttons, but he knows that I hate that. And I really do hate that people think this actually happened. So let's put that to rest. If you're a fan of the NWA, you acknowledge that there was a match between Ray Gonzalez and Jeff Jarrett, but the title never changed hands. The title never changed hands. Done. No more. I'm done with that. Now you guys are talking a lot here. So DKM says Cage would be used better, and I believe you're talking about Brian Cage, and I think you're talking about if Brian Cage returned to the United Wrestling Network or worked with the NWA. And yeah, absolutely, Brian Cage is a beast. I mean, he's freakishly big. I think he's bigger than Scott Steiner ever was. Chris says Cage is in a nice program with Sting. I know most of you like the NWA, but who really have been used greatly there? Well, Chris, to answer your question, I think the way that they used Ricky Starks was good. I think due to the pandemic, they blew it. And it wasn't the NWA's fault because they just ran out of time to tape more wrestling. I think the way that they were using Trevor Murdoch worked out really well for the NWA. I think Trevor Murdoch would be a great his time in the NWA. I think is a great way of showing you how they built somebody up. I think Aaron Stevens also was used in a very good way for the NWA. So I think I just gave you three guys who I thought were used really well. James Storm and Eli Drake as a tag team I think was good considering. I think they were trying to delay a confrontation between Eli Drake and Nick Aldis until later down the road because I think they knew that was a money match, but they wanted to keep Eli Drake, camera ready. So I think that's why they put him in the tag team division with Storm. I still think that was a good move, even though down the road, I mean, now we're looking at neither one of them are in the NWA. At least that's the rumor on the street. But yeah. I think Brian Cage would be excellent in the NWA. I know he's in a program with a guy who's nearing his 60s, but, I don't think that's the best utilization for his character. He should be challenging Moxley for the world title. And to DKM's point, not everyone can be a world champion. Not everyone can be in the main event picture, but certainly somebody like Brian Cage could be. Willie Bowen says Heidi Katrina from Wrestling EVE could be a contender for Trina Deeb's NWA World Championship title. I'm not sure about Heidi Katrina. I don't know a whole lot about her, but I'll take your word for it. The NWA is going to need a roster. They're going to need bodies. They're going to need good talent because again, that's kind of the interesting thing about this brave new world that we're in, that all these wrestling promotions have the ability to sign people to contracts. So MLW, which is the closest in size and reach to the NWA, is locking people under contract. You've got AEW and Impact with people under contract. Of course, the WWE with people under contract. So there is going to be less and less people who are available that are so well known. But the upside of that is you're going to see guys that you haven't heard of start filling in those spots. I mean, this show has been very supportive of Danny Limelight, and Danny Limelight has been great. But 2 years ago, you guys didn't know who Danny Limelight was. And now he's one of these guys who most of us think is going to be signed by AEW soon, if he hasn't already been. And he's a guy who's so phenomenally talented, and you guys weren't talking about him 2 years ago. A guy like Kevin Martinson, some of you know as Johnny Goodtime from the Rock Nest Monsters. He's a guy who's super talented as well, who's still waiting for that opportunity to shine. Ryan Taylor, who just got signed by NXT late last year, has been killing it in Southern California. He had a good showing in the Ring of Honor Pure Tournament, and now all of a sudden he's like a talk of the town. But he put in the work to get there. And all this does is create opportunity. And you're going to see more and more guys get an opportunity to shine that they didn't get in previous years. And as more talent gets signed, you're going to see more opportunities. Terry McDermott says he even liked the question mark. Yeah, I mean, look, for what it was okay. I mean, look, I don't love hokey gimmicks anyways. That's not my cup of tea. But it got a great reaction out of that crowd. And I'm not saying that was... I'm not saying that transcends all, but I'm saying that at the time, people were eating that question mark gimmick up. And then Willie Bowen says Wrestling EVE is a ladies wrestling promotion in the UK. Okay, there you see, Willie, you brought something new to the table. I had no idea, so that's cool. And oh man, I had a nice conversation with Dave Marquez the other day. And I heard some things that I'm not at liberty to discuss, but if you like women's wrestling, you want to stay tuned to what they're doing over at the United Wrestling Network, and that world title match is still going to happen, and it's going to happen in a very unique place. And the two competitors who were in the finals are still the two competitors in the finals. We'll talk about that more in the weeks to come, but stay tuned. If you were a fan of Chris Dickinson and Mike Bennett, things are going to still be really fun. DKM does not care for the question mark. Lamb says it's like work for Dave Marquez gets signed the past 3 years. No kidding. Like, there's so many good talent that Marquez has been working with for a while, and these guys just keep getting signed, and no one really talks about how much good talent has come out of that United Wrestling Network. But you start talking about some of the names on the surface, just right here in the present. Ryan Taylor just signed with NXT. Danny Limelight's about to be signed if he hasn't already. And then even further than that, Mike Bennett just showed up in Ring of Honor. I forgot her name. The three ladies that just signed with Lacey Ryan, and the other two, Priscilla Kelly and Elena Black, all just signed with NXT. That happened shortly after their appearances on the Primetime Live. So go figure, right? Dave Scooby says, if NWA has a base roster of 20 to 25 talents, I think they can run a rotation of outside talent as either enhancement or challenges for the titles. Keep it fresh. Dave Scooby, 100%, brother. You are right. But they don't even need 20 to 25 talents. Really? I mean, they could live with maybe about 10 signed talents to the show, right? 10. I think that's all you need. And you could bring an influx of unsigned talent to come in and work and do their job and go home. You don't need even 20 to 25. I mean, it would help. It'd probably be more beneficial, but I don't even think it's necessary. Chris says, is Georgia the right place to do NWA Power? He's asking because it's taking so long to get back together. I think the problem with the NWA right now is that they're afraid to make a move that's going to paint them in a negative light. They don't want to return too soon, because if they return too soon and talent starts getting sick, they don't want to be held accountable. It's a bad look. Plus, we have to remember too that there's been a lot of restructure for the NWA. Since March of last year, when they canceled all upcoming events, like they had leadership change, the front office has changed like significantly, and I'm not just talking about David Lagana, but Maureen Tracy. Who else left? A bevy of talent. I mean, we talked about Zicky Dice walked away at the end of the year. James Storm is no longer under contract. Brian Hebner's no longer with the NWA. Gosh, why can't I think of these names? Allison Kay's gone. Pretty much all the women are gone with the exception of Thunder Rosa, and pretty much all the men are gone with the exception of Nick Aldis. Now we know that the current champions have some sort of deal in place, so Elijah Burke is still going to be a part of the NWA. Trevor Murdoch is going to be part of the NWA. J.R. Kratos and Aaron Stevens will still be a part of the NWA. But at the end of the day, there's not a huge roster for the NWA. They just don't have it. So Ron says, I've always liked Ryan Taylor. I wanted him for the NWA, but Jay, you didn't think he was a good fit back when I posted that possibility. I didn't like the fit back then because I thought he was going to Ring of Honor, and I thought he was going to be locked up with Ring of Honor because Ring of Honor has actually been signing a lot of Southern California talent as of late. Brody King, Tyler Bateman, and I thought Ryan Taylor would just be another one of that on-growing list. Getting back to what Chris's question was about Georgia being the spot, I mean, you're going to face obstacles anywhere. But that studio audience, that look and feel, that arena worked so well with the perception that the NWA was trying to produce that I really do feel like that was the only place you can do NWA Power. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't do other things until they can be cleared to go back to the Georgia Public Broadcasting Studios, but I humbly believe that that's where they need to be. It has too much historical relevance. The look and feel of Power, like, they need that building because let's face it, next to the biggest star of the NWA is a 10 pounds of gold. Nick Aldis is a distant number 2. Thunder Rosa is a distant number 2, number 3, right? Let's be honest, Aldis and Thunder Rosa are the faces of the NWA outside of the 10 pounds of gold. But then that Georgia Public Broadcasting Studios was such a perfect fit for them. The look, the feel was such a perfect fit. I would hate to see them go anywhere else for NWA Power. And that's saying it from a guy who has to literally fly for 8 hours to go see a show. It's not short for me. I got to pay money to go there. I go to Championship Wrestling from Hollywood for free. It's a 2.5 hour drive. When they go to Thunder Studios, it's an 1.5 hour drive. Atlanta's the right place for them to be for NWA Power, and that's to my own detriment. Now, you guys got me off topic so much that the next things that I was going to talk about were who I thought would be good choices for the NWA World Championship. These were my misses. This is where I was going to say this is where the WWE, this is where the NWA missed it. I think because we were talking about Claudio Castagnoli, who I think would be perfect for a feud with Nick Aldis, but we talked about who would be a good challenge for Nick Aldis. But let's go back a little bit differently, and let's think about some of the guys who could have been a good fit as world champion. Now, I'm gonna really, there's any period of time you could bring up. I mean, a lot of people might say, the half-breed heartthrob Gino Hernandez might have been a good fit as NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. Rowdy Roddy Piper might have been a good fit, or Greg the Hammer Valentine. Nick Bockwinkel might have been a good fit for NWA World Champion. I actually would sign off on all three of those guys. But one name in particular who I think really did, who would have made so much sense as World Champion in the more modern era, and that would be this guy right here, Samoa Joe. Now, many of you remember Samoa Joe in the, of course, the Impact era of the NWA. Samoa Joe came into so much regard. He had just come off being a Ring of Honor World Champion, a very dominant run with Ring of Honor, had been killing it on the indies, like places like IWA Mid-South, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, ECWA. I mean, just everywhere Samoa Joe went, he was dominant. And he had a title, NWA International Tag Team title wins in 01 Japan. So Samoa Joe is this real dominant guy. He comes into Impact. He comes into the Impact zone and just desecrates the X Division. Just really, walks all over it. And then, the whole phrase, I could still hear Mike Tenay say it, the X Division, it's not about weight limits, it's about no limits. But it was mostly used as a junior heavyweight division until you get Samoa Joe into it, and he just dominates. I mean, he's probably the most dominant X Division champion of the company's history. And so then the opportunity comes where, and this video basically lives rent-free in my head. It was when Impact was on Fox Sports, and Samoa Joe Jeff Jarrett's in the middle of the ring holding the 10 pounds of gold, pretty much putting the whole roster on notice. And then you hear Samoa Joe's theme music hit, and he comes out holding his X Division championship. He had the white towel, the beaded necklace, and it was just Joe, just Samoa Joe. And he walks down there, and as he's walking to the ring, Jarrett is visibly shaken because, wait, I wasn't counting on this guy. And they basically walk by each other, and Joe gives him a little shoulder nudge, and the fear on Jeff Jarrett's face says everything. And then Impact waits forever to do anything with Samoa Joe, never gets an opportunity to become NWA World Champion, and ends up winning the TNA title from Kurt Angle years later. But he was so badass, and I think that if they would have went with him, he would be celebrated as one of the best world champions from that era. Of course, they waited too long. They didn't pull the trigger. We'll get to some of your comments here in a minute, because I do want to say the other guy. The other guy I really like as NWA World Champion is a former member of the Four Horsemen. You guys could see him on AEW Impact today, and I'm talking about Tully Blanchard. But don't get me wrong, because I'm not talking about Tully Blanchard from 1986 or 1988. No. I'm talking about this Tully Blanchard. I'm talking about 51-year-old Tully Blanchard. I'm talking about Tully Blanchard, who challenges Jeff Jarrett at WrestleCade in 2005 for the 10 pounds of gold. I'm talking about a guy who, let's face it, he was past his prime for sure, but he still had this amazing match with Jeff Jarrett. And I know what you're thinking, Jay, 51 years old, that's old. But let's think about it. Nick Bockwinkel didn't even really come into his prime until his late 40s, right? More so than that, how many titles has Hulk Hogan held past his 50s, right? And I mean, look, some of us are clamoring for the Great Muta to wrestle Nick Aldis, and the Great Muta's 61. So, for me, that's something I think should have happened. I think it's awful that it didn't happen. And I know what you guys are saying. Well, it didn't really fit with Impact. It really didn't fit with those storylines. But they could have made that work so well. And for a guy who is synonymous with the NWA like Tully Blanchard as being a former NWA World Tag Team Champion and NWA TV Champion. And honestly, had it not been for Ric Flair's celebrity and fame, he could have probably been an NWA World Champion back in 1986. It's just he was outshined by Ric Flair. So for me, those are two guys who I really think would have made excellent World Heavyweight Champions. I think they could have been great suitors for the 10 pounds of gold. And when it comes to Tully Blanchard, even if it was just on a short time limited basis, maybe even only a few matches, I would have popped hard for that. And I think that would have been awesome. Let's see some more of your comments. Willie Bowen says that NWA Power should be relocated to Long Beach. I mean, that might have been discussed, but that's not going to happen. I don't want to go too far back, but Willie Bowen also mentioned he wanted the Von Erichs on Primetime Live. But, the Von Erichs, just like Chris brought up, they're under contract with MLW, and I think they're pretty happy. I haven't heard much. It's not like Brian Pillman, who is looking to get out of his MLW contract. Ron Gibson says he loves Claudio. He has all his ROH DVDs. Love watching him tagging with Hero 2, Kings of Wrestling. I know Big Tex was going to go with the with Magnum TA, Terry Allen. Of course you're going to go with Magnum TA. He's an obvious choice. He should have been world champion, and had the fates not aligned against him, I think he would have been. I mean, that car accident really changed the direction for Jim Crockett Promotions in the mid 80s, and I think absolutely Magnum would have been champion. Now Chris brings up Phil Shatter, and he was someone I was gonna put on this list because we all knew he was gonna be world champion. Like, we knew it, and the fact that it didn't happen was kind of surprising, right? Because they were grooming him, and he was the golden child from NWA Anarchy. He was this guy who was just so good. And of course, he's had some success outside of the NWA. I mean, he went to Impact and had some time there as Gunner, and now he's working with the WWE as Jackson Riker. I think he just recently made his main roster debut. So, but yeah, at the time, back in 2008, 2009, 2010. He was definitely one of those guys we thought was going to be a world champion. Willie Bowen, bringing up Dr. Death Steve Williams. Yes, Dr. Death. Dr. Death would have been outstanding. And I don't care what era you're talking about. You could talk about when he was UWF champion. You could talk about when he was the UWF champion, the Herb Abrams UWF champion. I still would have popped hard for Dr. Death to win the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. Chris Drummond said that, but Joe didn't work the NWA though. Well, I mean, to a degree he did, because he worked 0-1. I mean, he had matches with Hashimoto. He had matches with, he won the Fire Emblem tournament in 0-1, which usually was an indication that he would be set up for a title opportunity. He also worked with IWA Mid-South, which at the time had connections to the NWA. And on top of all that, he was working with Dave Marquez out here in Southern California with the Inoki Dojo and the Tokon television series, which was part of the NWA by way of Antonio Inoki's membership. So he really was working NWA prior to joining Impact. And then the fact of the matter is that while working for Impact, I mean, that was the top prize of Total Nonstop Action Wrestling for the first 5 years of its existence. Lamb says his first X Division title run, that was fire. You're absolutely right. Just an incredible. That was probably my favorite time of wrestling, watching Joe just go toe to toe with these junior heavyweights. These guys were all super fast, and Joe is just the perfect base for that. Willie Bowen brings up Chief Wahoo McDaniel. Yes, absolutely. Wahoo McDaniel would have been celebrated. I mean, I don't think there ever was a Native American World's Heavyweight Champion, so that would have been cool and historical. And Blackjack Mulligan, to a lesser extent, I was never a huge Blackjack Mulligan guy. I mean, I loved Barry Windham, but I wasn't a big fan of his pops. Terry McDermott says Andre the Giant is an example. Didn't need the title. Absolutely. Andre was a show in of himself. Same thing with Bruiser Brody. He never needed the title to be over. Neither did Andre. Neither did really Stan Hansen. Never needed a belt to be over. AWA saw things differently, but yeah. Ron, did you like my choice of Tully, or you think it's just obscure? The reason why I love it so much is because it is obscure, and I know I'm the only one on that hill, but he was still able to go back then, and I think if you guys can find that match, it might be on YouTube. Look for Jeff Jarrett versus Tully Blanchard 2005 Wrestle Reunion. I think you would like that. Great Muda will challenge for Muda's going to be challenging for the Globe Honored Crown. Lamb wanted to remind us for Pro Wrestling Noah next, and I still want to see him versus Nick Aldis. Don't get me wrong, his advanced age does nothing to deter my desire to see him challenge Nick Aldis. And I mean, if Sting could win the NWA title back in 2005, why not the Great Muda in 2021? Magnum TA would have been a great NWA World Champion, Willie says. Chris says, was it because he was an Impact guy? I think I already answered that. Willie Bowen says, Stan Hansen would have been a great NWA World Heavyweight Champion. I got that too. How about Terry Taylor as NWA World Heavyweight Champion? Terry Taylor's another good one, and I'll tell you why. Because Terry Taylor was involved with the NWA on kind of like a part-time spot. In fact, he was a North American champion. The North American title that we saw Drew Onyx hold and Damian Wayne hold and that Jeff Jarrett wore on WWE programming, Terry Taylor had that title and was wrestling in Music City Wrestling and the promotion that would eventually become NWA Anarchy and NWA Wildside. He held that North American title. He, too, would have been a good guy. I have a few more names. I don't have photos for them, but I have a few more names who I thought would have been... oh, crap, Willie Bowen got me. I'll get back to what I was going to say. Willie Bowen got me. Absolutely, you're right. Jack Briscoe was the first Native American. How did that slip my mind? You were absolutely right, Willie. Apologize to everyone who's here. So let me see... Okay, yeah. I'll get to my list in a minute. Ron says, I don't mind it. I can see your angle with that totally. It's just obscure. Yeah. Chris brings up Kenta, who right now is in the States, would we like to see him as NWA champion working for New Japan Pro Wrestling? And I say absolutely. DKM even agrees with that, and it's hard to impress DKM. And then Terry McDermott says Taylor was a World Junior Heavyweight Champion. Yes, he was. But let me give some more names on my list because, not that I'm trying to pander to the month, but it is Black History Month. And one of the things that the NWA sorely misses out on is representation when it comes to its World Heavyweight Champions. Now, I know our friends over at the NWA Gold recently posted the 8 champions who were Japanese-born on a list recently, and of course there's been multiple Canadian wrestlers to hold the 10 pounds of gold. We know of 2 British wrestlers to hold that title, but there's not a lot of African American influence when it comes to that 10 pounds of gold. Now, we know Ron Killings held the title twice with Impact, but another guy that I'm thinking about would be Monty Brown, the alpha male. And again, I know this is kind of centered back on Impact, but his run in Impact was huge. He was over with that crowd, and could have absolutely been the guy to beat Jarrett for that title, been the guy to beat Shamrock for that title, been the guy to beat Rhino for that title. I mean, he was there for a lot of these good feuds. And again, when we talk about how underutilized Cesaro is, or how underutilized Samoa Joe was in early Impact, Monty Brown very much in that same notoriety. He should have been used better. They could have put that title on him. His run in the WWE is mostly forgettable, but when he was in Impact, I mean, his presence was very dominant. And I really think that he would have made an excellent addition to that list of title holders to hold the 10 pounds of gold. More of my names, more from my list is Daniel Bryan. Now, obviously, we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show, but he was supposed to be the world champion. He literally was supposed to win the 10 pounds of gold at in Bayman, Puerto Rico, and reclaiming the gold tournament. It just never panned out that way. Of course, another name that you guys might not know who was flirting with the idea of working with the NWA, and it came to a halt because he re-signed with the WWE, but Booker T, the five-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion, was rumored to he was supposed to challenge Adam Pearce. Now, this is kind of like it's not really well documented because the match never came to fruition. He signed, but they were building it up, and in fact, there was a lot of promos where Pearce kind of alluded to Booker T. But the match never panned out. But I think if it did and Booker T would have won, I think that would have been a huge victory for the NWA. Of course, he ended up signing with the WWE, so that never came to pass. Another name would have been Dustin Rhodes, the Natural, the son of Dusty. Of course, Cody ended up fulfilling that destiny of holding the same belt his father did. There was also speculation that Cody, in between his time in Impact and the WWE and now AEW, that he would also wrestle against. He was supposed to wrestle against Adam Pearce. Those matches never came to fruition. I'm seeing some of your names right there, and I'm gonna get to them in a minute. A couple more names. Charlie Haas. I know desperately the promoter in the Southwest was trying to get somebody of notoriety to come in and win that 10 pounds of gold in Texas. And his first shot was Lance Cade. And unfortunately, Lance Cade ended up passing away before any real momentum could have happened with him. And then eventually he would turn his attention to Charlie Haas and then later Lance Archer. All three of those guys, it was Ken Taylor's desire to put the 10 pounds of gold on them. It just never came to fruition. And then, of course, another guy who's a sentimental favorite of mine, and if you've been following the NWA for the last 20 years, you would recognize this name, but Damian Wayne. Now, Damian Wayne, for those of you guys who don't know, is a phenomenal worker. Great wrestler. He feuded with Adam Pearce multiple times through all of Adam's 5 reigns as World's Heavyweight Champion, and he was actually supposed to be the guy to win the 10 pounds of gold after Colt Cabana and Adam Pearce left the NWA. But it just so happened it never happened because due to politics, due to NWA promoters wanting to swerve the internet marks, it just didn't happen, and they never gave Damian Wayne the chance. And although he'd get multiple runs with the national championship and eventually would win the tag titles, I really feel like that was a missed opportunity. Damian Wayne would have been perfect as an NWA World Champion, someone that respected the title, loved the belt, loved the legacy, and I felt like they did him dirty. I know we're past the hour, guys. We're going to wrap this up soon, but I do want to go through your guys' comments because I see a lot of great names, and I want to acknowledge those. Ted DiBiase, Willie Bowen throws his name out there as a guy who could have been a great world champion. Absolutely. The fact that Ted DiBiase never won an actual World's Heavyweight Championship is a little disappointing. I mean, I know he held the UWF title, but in the same sense, he never held the NWA World title. He never held the WWE World title, and he certainly could have been a bigger name than they allowed him. Ernie Ladd, absolutely. Terry McDermott brings up another great name. Ernie Ladd, that guy was dominant on both coasts. He could play the babyface, he could play the heel. Former San Diego Charger. He would have been a guy I definitely could have gotten behind as a world champion. Ron Gibson goes, I wonder what NWA would have been like with the King Jerry Lawler as champion. And that, which era? Are we talking about 2005? Are we talking about 1995? Are we talking about, in his heyday in the early 80s? I mean, because I think I would have agreed to all of those. Willie Bowen brings up Rocky Johnson, Butch Reed, Bobo Brazil, Junkyard Dog. Absolutely. Butch Reed is a guy that I think they could have done something with. I mean, look, they were kind of already on that path when Jim Crockett Promotions left the NWA. It was a short time after that you had Ron Simmons winning the WCW World Championship, and that was historic because although WCW was still kind of early in its infancy in terms of its name and credibility, a lot of people just kind of acquiesced WCW was the NWA, and therefore when Ron Simmons won that title, it felt like he might have won that super meaningful 10 pounds of gold, when in reality, he won the WCW World Championship. Still a huge accomplishment, still meant a lot to that community, but, man, could you imagine if that would have been, Ric Flair that he defeated for that title, for the NWA World Championship? I think it would have held a lot more weight than it did. Junkyard Dog never really seemed to me like to be the main event guy. He was always in the upper mid card, but Bobo Brazil was the WWA heavyweight champion, world champion. Although that's not recognized in the same vein as the National Wrestling Alliance, it was very historic for Bobo Brazil to have that world title back when segregation was still very prominent in this country. Same thing can be said with Rocky Johnson. He was another guy who I think could have been a someone of relevance to hold that title. Lamb says the only one should be the next NWA World Champion is Eli Drake. I love Eli Drake, and I agree with you. He should be World's Heavyweight Champion. I have other thoughts on who will be the next World Champion, but that's the match that the NWA should have done pre-pandemic. I don't know if they can still do that now. Other names would be a slap to his face. If that happens, he should have the NWA. He should leave the NWA because his NWA run right now. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what the contract status is of Eli Drake. There's so many guys who are gone. I don't know if he was re-signed. So, I mean, his time in the NWA could already be done. Ron Gibson says, what was Barry Windham's reign like? I always thought he was better than people thought he was. Windham had a short run. I mean, it was mostly to get the title out of Japan because shortly after he defeated Muta for the belt, he was dropping it to Ric Flair. I wish they'd have done more with Windham's run, but again, it just didn't happen. And of course, when Windham became involved with the NWA later, he was already kind of past his prime, and he wasn't in the best ring shape. He wasn't super motivated. And, I don't know. I think he's one of those guys that I think they could have done something better for. Paul Orndorff, Willie says, I don't know about Orndorff. I was never a huge Orndorff guy. Jay Lethal's NWA champ would have been great. I still think he would make sense right now. Ron Gibson says, Chris Hero to take the belt off Aldis to create a back and forth war. Maybe. DCam says Windham basically defended against mid-card guys. Yeah, it wasn't really well celebrated. Kevin Von Erich, Willie brings up another good guy. He was part of that tournament that saw Mike Rapata defeat Jerry Flynn for the title, and I think that would have been an absolute perfect time to put the belt on Kevin Von Erich, but they obviously didn't choose that. Willie says Goldberg. There was a time where it would have made sense when Goldberg was wrestling in Hustle 1. WCW was done. Impact was in existence, but he wasn't working for Impact, and that they were controlling the NWA title at that time. So I don't think that would have worked out too well. Terry McDermott says Jordan Clearwater. We'll see, man. That's definitely something that could happen. But like I said, we are running a little bit overtime today. Guys, it's always so fun talking wrestling with you guys, talking NWA. And, of course, we do this every Tuesday. That's 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific, every Tuesday. Please, welcome. You're more than welcome to come back and join us, and we'll talk more NWA wrestling next week. If you are interested in supporting the podcast, you could do so by ordering merchandise. We have things like Alliance Wrestling hats. We have t-shirts. You can get those at alliance-wrestling.com. Go to the merch link, and it'll take you to our merch store. You can support the show that way. Of course, we would appreciate a thumbs up if you enjoy this podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification so you can be a part and know when we're going to go live, because sometimes we go live when you guys aren't expecting it. And, of course, we do the podcast. The audio version of this podcast is available on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. Just say, "Hey, Alexa, play the Alliance Guys podcast," and I bet you someone's going to play right now. As always, guys, it's fun for me to be a part of this with you guys every week. Also, make sure you follow us on all social medias at the Alliance Blog. That's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Of course, you're watching on Twitch or YouTube. We appreciate your support. And well, that's going to do it for us this time. I do want to remind you, this is my Deep Thoughts by J. Cal, which is actually a quote by Bruce Lee. Man, I'm talking over myself today. And that is, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and what is essential. Until next time, fellas.